I first moved to London, that's all I was doing for like different artists, TV shows, just acoustic things. And yeah, it never gets, not that it's difficult, but there's a lot more to think about, I think.
So the AJ, going back to AJ Tracy and Glastonbury Pyramid Stage again, you said that was the first time that you saw your guitar. You must have had a rehearsal with AJ, mustn't you?
Well, not with AJ. We had rehearsals, so I remember Glastonbury was on the Saturday, or Sunday, I can't remember what day it was, and we rehearsed, I think, Monday to Friday, because we had to build a whole set. So it was just like, and it was very unusual brief, because it was like, here's my songs, and the songs are already like there. We can't take anything away, but we just had to basically add a rock band feel to it and make arrangements and endings, things like that. And the problem is as well, sometimes when it's new music, especially when it's rap music, where the name of the song may not be mentioned in the song at all. So they'll be like, oh, we're going to play this song now. And we're all like, okay, cool. But none of us wants to admit we don't know what song that is. Until like you have to make notes, and you'll be like, in your notes, it'll be like, the one that makes this sound or whatever, you know.
Right.
So we had 5 days rehearsal without him, and we would, and then he came on the last day. And it's always stressful when the artist turns up on the last day, because they could be like, oh, I absolutely hate it, can we start again? But he loved it, he was really nice. So he made it easy for us. But then, yeah, and then the next day was the gig, and we were all like kind of, you know, you can't really enjoy the gig. I mean, you can't really, it was enjoyable, but it was kind of a blur. We walked on the stage, next thing you know, we're walking off, and we're like, what just happened?
So you don't have time to be in the moment, really, then. I always think this is really important. I always say this to musicians when we run BBC Introducing Stages, that just try and find, even if it's just 10 seconds, to think, here I am standing looking out, say, at 4,500 people at Why Not, or whatever. I think that's important to bank that.
No, I agree, absolutely. I think when we're on tour, like when you're on a long tour, we will usually do that before every gig. We'll get together before we go on stage, and like we'll take turns doing a little kind of pep talk, wherever. And sometimes it's serious, most of the time it isn't. But like it just kind of like, we just kind of take stock of what the show is, or if it's, especially sometimes it's great when it's like we're doing a Midlands show, or for James, a Middlesbrough show, we go like, hey guys, you know, this is cool, our family's here, let's, you know, have a good time, whatever. But yeah, it's good to do that. I think when we just, at a Glastonbury show, we were just kind of all like hanging around backstage, not really sure what we were doing, and then you're on, and then we just run on. And I remember it was so fast-paced that like, I remember going on stage thinking, I need to tune this guitar, but there wasn't a gap. And I was just kind of trying to do it here and there. And I remember thinking really paranoid about hearing the recording, thinking, oh, it's going to sound so bad. But it sounded right. So
yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it, that I think it is so easy to be overcritical as a musician, over self-critical.
Yes, that's so true. I think that, especially I think over the years, the standard of musicians has got higher and higher and higher. And like, if you just go on Instagram now, and just see like guys just playing in their room, it's so insane on an instrument, so amazing. Oh, and girls, obviously, not just guys, but like, you know, the standard's so high now that like, you know, I know musicians who kind of like see that stuff and be like, and it makes them very insecure about their playing. But I think that you have to always remember that if you're a musician, it doesn't matter if you can't do certain things, but I think you should know what your strengths are. And either play to those, or, you know, work on your weaknesses. But like, yeah, I think, you know, it's okay to feel that way, you know, have insecurities about that kind of things. But then like also know what you're good at and what you bring, and have confidence in that, I think.
When we put gigs on in Nottingham, there are certain go-to musicians that, you know, solo artists, because the pandemic meant a rise in the number of solo artists, and now we're in this position where they're looking for backing bands because they've been born, or the music's been born out of their bedroom. They're now going back on the road. They're looking for backing musicians. So it feels like it's a really good time for session musicians at the moment locally. Is that the same nationally?
Yeah, I think so. I think that like what I notice nowadays is there'll be kind of like what we call like little units of musicians. So like say, if you've got if you play guitar or whatever instrument you play, if you can kind of form a band with your friends, like, and with the mind of like, you know, you want to, if this is what you want to do anyway, you know, get together with your mates and like be a unit and put some videos out there on YouTube, or like maybe covering artist songs. You don't even have to have vocals on there, but like this is what we do. And like, and sometimes I see very often an artist will turn up with, when one person gets the gig, they'll be like, oh, they've actually already got a band together, and they'll get the whole band. And so it's definitely good to do that. And I think, yeah, that's more common now. So if you have that available to you, the option, definitely do that. Don't always think you have to be on your own. It's good to work with other people as well, so you can get used to that. And then hopefully, most of the time, the way that you get into this industry is generally by somebody you know is doing it or brings you in. So it's good to have those, those kind of things going, yeah.
It's a great tip, that I hadn't thought about that, about having a band minus a vocalist. Yeah, it's a clever idea.
In London especially, there's loads of what they'll do is, we used to do it before actually, we had at Ronnie Scott's, we started a jam night, and it became like kind of the biggest jam night in London really, and everybody would be there, and we would let anybody sing. It doesn't matter, and some days we had like celebrities in there, like Dave Stewart, Eurythmics, or like Ellie Goulding who's walking, because it's Ronnie Scott's in Soho. But then also you'd get somebody who's worked in an office and they wanted to sing, and we would let anybody sing with us. It's fine. But then we got some gigs from that as well. People kind of learn who you are, so just put yourself out there, I think.
Let's just rewind to, so you picked up your guitar, you did some Oasis covers and so on, then you were in a band. Yeah. Where did it, because there's quite a big gap from there, again, to the Pyramid stage. So what's the story between those two extremes?
I was in a band from about 16 to 19, just playing around the Midlands, kind of like Birmingham, Wolverhampton, a few things. We won some competitions and stuff. And then, back then, we didn't really, it was before social media really, so there was no way of promoting stuff. I remember it was about 5 years before Arctic Monkeys, were really popular on MySpace, because they were one of the first people to do that. But yeah, I would just the funny thing I was saying to you earlier on, in the Midlands back then, we didn't even know that music was a job option. Nobody even told us. So after that, I was in a band, and I think I was studying business or something, and then I found out you could do music as a course, because I didn't even know you could do music as a course. So I left my degree and went back and did my BTEC in pop music, and then I did my degree, but I still didn't know you could do. I was like, how do I make this into a job? And then I think I left university with my degree, and the first thing I did was, as soon as I finished, the lecturer was like, "Oh, do you want to be a teacher here?" I was like, "Yeah, okay." And I just taught basically for a while. It wasn't until I was about 28, I think I was doing gigs in Midlands, and I met somebody on a gig who we had 2 nights in Birmingham at the same show. The first night the keyboard player was with us. The second time he wasn't playing, he came and watched, but he was playing with at the time Peter Andre that's when he was kind of famous, and now he does Ollie Murs, a few other artists. But he just said to me, he was like, "Oh, are you interested in doing any session work?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, of course." And he was like, and then he got me an audition. And that was the first thing I did. And through that, I met other guitarists who, in fact, I didn't get that gig because I was very green. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I went to the audition, and the other guitarist who got it, who's actually very successful, I got on with him well, and he gave me some gigs. And that was how I first started. But I still didn't move to London then. And I remember doing a gig on a cruise ship or something like that when I was a teacher. And I met a guy, and he was like, "Why don't you move to London?" And I was like, "Why?" And he was like, "You can do music as a job." And I was like, "You crazy, mate? Music as a job, that doesn't exist." And then, I just quit my job and did it. Yeah.
So, and this was, I happen to know this was in the December, wasn't it? That
you So
you took the decision right at the end of the year to quit. What is it's a secure teaching is a secure job, isn't it?
Yeah, a very secure job, and I think teaching is a great job. And I was a lecturer for a few years, and then I was a kind of a peripatetic where you work for the council, you teach guitar to schools and stuff. And I was doing well. I mean, I was working every day. I was teaching. I was doing gigs here and there. And then I remember when I started getting the occasional kind of pop music gig or session gig. I started a few days I'd have to phone in sick for my teaching job, or I'd pay my mate 100 quid to go and teach for me and pretend it was me, and then and which I thought was fun because the kids loved me, everything was fine. But then I remember they called me in the office and they were like, "Yeah, Rick, we like you, kids like you, but you have an extraordinary amount of absences." And then I didn't tell, but by that time I'd actually already secretly moved to London. I was trying to juggle both things, and then that was at Christmas time. And I was like, I appreciate you trying to help me keep this job, but I just made a rash decision, quit my job. And that was December. And then I was on tour in February. I was saying, yeah, so I got a tour straight away. And which at the time, I didn't realise how... But now, in hindsight, I was very lucky and very fortunate to do that.
That was quite a long tour, was it?
Yeah, that was with a guy called Julian Preta. He's a British artist who was, his career was kind of big in France, Germany, Belgium, that kind of region. And the first thing I did was we did a kind of a 2-month support tour with James Blunt. And so my first tour was like stadiums. And we were the support band, so it's not quite with headlining or anything, but like we did that. And and I continued to work with him for many years. And I made some very good friends from that, and kind of still my friends to this day, yeah.
What's life like on the road when you're touring?
Life on the road, you kind of get, as you get better with anything, you get better at touring, you kind of get better at managing your time, and you got a lot of free time. I mean, like, if you know the songs really well, you haven't got to, like, learn them in the day or anything. You got all your days are free, and depending on the status of the artist or the size of the venues, the kind of better treatment you get. So in the best case scenario, you got nice hotels, and you're just kind of, like, hanging around, go for lunch, there's catering on there, you know, and you're just trying to basically stay sane and healthy. In the early days, obviously, when we first started touring, we were like, all this alcohol's free, all this is free, and then you end up making some bad decisions. But then as you get out, like, sometimes we would, like, I remember one tour, after the gig, me and the bass player would go to the gym, just to really stay out of trouble. It's quite boring, actually, don't do that. But yeah, it's touring is really good. If you were the new artist who got maybe less budget, you might be in a splitter van, kind of going around the UK. Still fun, still, you know. But then I can't lie, it is more fun when you're going to tour bus, and it's a bit nicer.
So I'm just guessing that, you know, I mean, there are two things. Firstly, you say you don't always realise that you can make money out of being a musician. Well, that's come through loud and clear that you can. And then from there, it's the amount of work that you can get to stay secure. And can you give any tips on keeping in work? Because you know, there's no contract, is there? There's no sick pay, there's no holiday pay. So you know, you've got to get gigs basically. Yeah,
I mean, like, you know, the thing I think it's important to realise is that, like, you know, being a musician as a job, it's not just TV and touring. There's so many things that you can do, and the more things that I've met musicians who say they only do tours. But then, if you're only doing one tour a year for a month or two, don't get me wrong, it can be very lucrative, but it's not, you know, you'd want to do other things as well. So, like,
you're not making contact, so I wouldn't have thought while you're on tour with the same group of people.
No, that's the thing, yeah. That's one other danger. If you kind of stay in the same thing for too long and don't do things outside it, you kind of limit your options to get work. So it's important to kind of do as many things as you can, meet as many people as you can. But, like, people say this to me sometimes. They're like, "Oh, how, you know, don't you feel an air of uncertainty?" And I always say, like, I've done it for over 10 years now, and it's touch wood. Is there any wood here? This is wood. Okay. It's been okay so far. It's been good so far. So, you know, the key is to do lots of different things. And, you know, and the thing is, being a musician, I remember when I did David Guetta, we were traveling on a private jet for 2 weeks. But the day I flew back, they put us on EasyJet on the way back, and I think I had a middle seat as well.
Oh,
no. I remember thinking,
awful for
but then the next day I was doing a gig like in like Cornwall or something. So basically, you know, you get a taste of this life sometimes, but always remember it's not really your life.
No.
And don't be you know, if you, like, for me, my favorite gigs now, if my friends are on a gig, or if it's local, or if it's well paid, I have a great time. You know, doesn't have to be on TV or, you know, and that stuff.
You mentioned David Guetta. We do have a clip of this. This is unbelievable. This is my favourite clip, actually, because this is David Guetta with a complete orchestra and you as well. Yeah? This is astonishing, this one. So I think I was sitting right in front of you there for all of that. So I apologise. It was behind my back. What was going on there? That looks astonishing.
That was I think it was like some. There's a show in France called Les Victoires. I guess it's like the Brits, you know, and I think he was getting some like kind of like lifetime achievement award or something. So he was like, I want to do it with that album at that time had a lot of guitar and bass on it. So he's like, I want guitar, I want bass, and I want an orchestra. And obviously he's a very big guy, so he wants a 40-piece orchestra. He gets on. But like it was it was a very unusual gig because there was no but drums. It just David Getty, he had an Ableton controller, so he really was playing triggering samples, which I was surprised by. I was like, because he doesn't have to do that. You can't see what he's doing. He could literally doing an Etch a Sketch or like playing Fruit Ninja, and you wouldn't know. But he was really triggering the stuff, and so his guitar and bass, and that was really fortunate as well because he's one of my mates who got picked to play bass. So I was like going to be my friend again, and then it was just a huge orchestra. And what's funny, that was one of the first times I worked alongside an orchestra, and watching them work to how we work was so different. I remember, so we got to the rehearsal, so we just turned up in Paris, and we had these directions, and we got an Uber or whatever to the rehearsal. We walked in this room, huge orchestra, and I remember the orchestra had learnt one of the songs in a different key, and now for us, it's fine, change the semitone tone, it's easy, we're used to it, but the orchestra, they freaked out.
Did they?
Yeah, they really freaked out, because they were like, the singer was like, oh, this song's actually not in E, it's in D, so it's a tone down. And the conductor was like, we can't do that. And we were like, you have to do that, because they can't sing it otherwise. But like watching them scramble with their charts and fix it, they did it in the end, but it's funny, because we would never say no. You can't really say no, like, can you just play this chord? He'd be like, nah, don't do that. Hate that chord.
You wouldn't last, would you, as a session musician?
No, that's bringing the negative vibe, you never want to be the person who's bringing everybody down.
So how do you learn to play a song whether it's AJ Tracey, David Guetta, whoever, when you're jumping in for a one-off gig? Yeah. Do they give you some sort of notation? Are the tabs involved? How do you do it?
You just get the track, really. I mean, it depends what it is. Like, depends, because obviously it's somebody's job within their team to give you the music. And if they're really organised, they've got an MD, which is a musical director, who's in charge of the band. And in the best case scenario, he'll be like, this is the track. Here's the track also with the guitar boost, your part's boosted. And then you get separate WAV files sometimes of the individual guitar parts. And then they'll be like, and they'll be quite specific. They'll be like, there's 3 guitars on the track. This one's distorted, this one's got chorus and whatever. And they'll be like, can you mix them together? Or whatever. They'll be quite specific. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is just a song, and you have to,
do it by ear.
Yeah, I mean, it's always by ear, but I've never been given a notation for that. For pop gigs, I haven't.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I assume you get the tabs sent through or something like that.
No, well, I mean, the tab stuff is obviously, tabs are normally made by kind of like, it's a free open source thing, so they're made by people. So there will be tabs. Sometimes you can look for that kind of stuff, but like, they generally won't be right. But yeah, it's so if you don't already work things out by ear, I'm sure most of you do, it's essential, really. I think that's the most essential thing. And also being able to do it fast. I've had ones before. I was saying, I did a day rehearsal with Harry Styles, and they didn't send me anything. They sent me nothing at all.
So you walk into a studio, there's Harry.
Yeah, we walked in, and they were like, they just start, the band were already there. They already had a band. They wanted somebody else to play. My job was going to be basically playing Harry's guitar parts when he didn't want to or couldn't or whatever. And they didn't send me any songs. They were like, okay, this is the song. And they played it for about 30 seconds. I think they were trying to test me.
Sounds like.
And then, or they were just so like chilled, yeah, this is the song. And then we had to just play it.
Or maybe it's like, do you own the album? Have you listened to
the album wasn't out. Nothing was out then. Yeah, this was very early. This is before anything had been released.
Sounds really weird, that.
Well, I've had that before as well. I remember in some auditions they do that as well. They'll be like, I remember doing a Rita Ora audition, and they'll be like, all right, guys, this is the song. Okay, you're up. And he'll be like that, and and I think they do that either. There's 2 reasons they're doing that. Either they can't be bothered to send any emails before that day, or they want to see how quickly you pick things up, because that's also important, Because I've seen people on bands before. I remember a guitarist the MD will get on the keyboard and play a keyboard line, and he'll be like, "Can you play that, please?" If they're horrible, they'll be like, "Can you play that?" In a really rude way. And the guitarist is like, "Yeah, if you record it, email it me. I'll learn it for tomorrow." And that's enough to lose the gig, I think.
Is it?
Yeah, it depends how scrupulous they are.
Right.
Sometimes they'll be like, yeah, it's fine, but like, you got to be at least have a go at it, you got to...
So you're basically going to mimic what you've just heard in the room shortly after.
Yes,
wow.
Yeah.
And that's a pressured situation, isn't it?
Oh, that is the most precious thing when everyone's looking at you. and like, and somebody's like, and then somebody's always talking or like playing, you know, trying to put you off. But that's you know, that's few and far between nowadays. But like sometimes it can be quite cutthroat, I think sometimes. But I think that's generally somebody when somebody does it that way to you. I think it says more about their insecurities because they could have said to you beforehand, you know, like it's not a competition, you know. But yeah, but basically, you can be prepared for things like that, you know. Just how quickly can you learn something, you know, and it doesn't have to be perfect because you can make changes, but you definitely incorporate that into your, you know, playing.
They should look after you because actually what you're doing is making their artists sound great, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's your job, I think. You know,
yeah.
make the artists more than sound great. I think you want to make them sound comfortable.
Yeah.
Because sometimes these artists have never had a band before, so a drum kit's too loud for them. You know, sometimes, especially if you've got like maybe a young artist who's like 16, who's never played with a band before, and you know, for them to have a loud, intimidating band around them, you just got to make them feel comfortable, I think, and don't surprise them with any weird chords.
They sometimes say never meet your heroes. They say don't meet your heroes because they're unlikely to live up to your expectations. Have you any evidence of that? Who have you met that's impressed you or otherwise?
Well, I mean, most people I've met have been very nice. I think the thing is sometimes when you meet sometimes people who are famous, but not necessarily somebody who you follow or listen to or whatever. So like I've had some very funny encounters. I remember I had like a phone call with Pamela Anderson once because she was dating an artist I was working with. And I remember like when I was doing David Guetta, Paris Hilton was like kind of hanging out backstage with us. But I was thinking, oh, that's cool. But then the thing is, in that situation, you think, I do want to take a picture actually. but because you're in like, once you go past the line and you're in that bit, it's like, okay, now they feel comfortable in front of me. So you have to really, when you really want to go, can I have a picture, please?
Yeah.
You probably want to wait till you know them a bit, you know.
Well
like
enough, yeah.
But I remember doing some gigs. There's a guitarist called Gary Moore I used to really like when I was younger, and I remember doing 3 gigs supporting him in Spain, and I was just too scared to speak to him.
Were you?
Yeah, I didn't want to bother him. I heard he was rude, so I was like, I don't want to bother him. Do you know what I mean? And I remember one of the.
Do you regret that now?
Well, especially now he's dead.
Yeah.
I don't think that me not speaking. I don't know, but I don't think me not speaking to him has nothing to do with his death. But I'm like, nice to meet you, Gary. Have you ever thought about having your 5 a day? But it doesn't. But I remember on one of the gigs, he was at the side of the stage, and the whole band was Spanish people except for me. And I was on guitar on the side, and it was like brass section, organ, everything, but 10-piece band. And Gary Moore was sitting on the edge of the stage with a beer with a girl on his knee, probably his girlfriend, I'm assuming. And he had a beer, and then he was like, "Hey, are you guys English?" And the Spanish guys were like, "No, we're Spanish." And I was like, "Hey, I'm English." At the corner, he didn't see me.
Oh.
But I never spoke to him. I should have spoke to him, and now he's dead.
Yeah. Gary Moore did Parisian Walkways?
Yeah, he did.
And that's an astonishing piece of guitar.
I literally had like a printout, a really bad printout that I'd done on like Word and stuck it on my guitar case with sellotape. It immediately came off, but I did have that.
Did you? Yeah. It's interesting. It's such a great track. Who would you like to work with that you haven't? Do you have like a bucket list?
Well, you know, I think that now I don't have a desire to kind of work with any specific artist for any other reason than like I feel very fortunate that I work with my friends, and it doesn't really feel. It sounds really cliche, but if you can work doing something you enjoy, especially with your friends, it just feels like you forget that you're working. Yeah. It doesn't feel like work. So at the moment, I'm very fortunate to be working with like someone like in fact, the drummer that I met who told me to move to London, I still tour with him. He's the one who's in the James Arthur band with me, and we still tour together. We speak to all the time. You know, and it's like, so sometimes I hear stuff and think, oh, that's cool. I'd like to do that. But like, I'd like to work with anybody really who would be like, oh, we know what you do on your guitar. Can you just do that? That's what I'd like to do really. Just be yourself. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes when you hear bands like Rihanna's musicians or some of the kind of the more R&B acts, then that's the ones I think that are probably the most fun, but also can be the most stressful.
This is not meant to be a rude question, but how full is your diary? I mean, you're freelance, aren't you?
Yeah, freelance,
so it's down to you to fill your diary. And did you get agents, actually? For
not really. There is agents. There is stuff like that out there. And like there is a friend of mine who does have an agency. So there is that kind of thing. But generally, it's not really. I don't have a manager. I don't have a specific agent. But they are out there. And there's some very good ones. And there's one called Beck, it's Beck, and he's a guy called Bob Knight. He's a drummer from Leeds, and he's like he sorts loads of stuff. So every time you see a TV show, and there's like string sections, and he books all those guys, and all the TV shows you see. And in fact, the David Guetta thing that was through him, and also when I did Guitar Hero, the computer game, he got me on that as well. Well, his agents, yeah.
You mentioned Guitar Hero. We've got a clip here of Guitar Hero live. I'm intrigued to know what was going on here, actually. Have a look at this.
Yeah, it's terrible. She's a presenter on TV.
So Guitar Hero live. What's going on there, then?
So it's like, you know how Guitar Hero is like animated usually? They did one where it was like POV live action. So instead of like, I don't know if any of you guys play Guitar Hero, but normally you kind of you're looking at the stage at the band. On this one, you're the guitarist on the stage. So like, it was a very random thing. They were like, I had to do an audition for, and all it said was interactive music video. So we didn't know what it was. So this audition, and this is actually a good lesson. I went into I remember turning up with my pedal board, all my gear, to the studio in London, and I walked in and there was like a panel of people sitting there like the X Factor or something, and they were like, okay, so what we want you to do is just, it was a Foo Fighters song, and they were like, we want you to just like, rock out on the guitar and like go up to the bass player and vibe with him and then go to the drums. And I looked around and I was like, there's nobody in here. It's just me. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, this is actually really embarrassing. I don't want to do this. But then I thought to myself, but then what I realised is they've seen this all day. It's not embarrassing to them.
Yeah.
It's okay to be embarrassed myself, but don't let them. Just be confident. So I did it, and then then I got the gig, and it wasn't until after we'd filmed loads of stuff. They were like, "If signed this non-disclosure agreement." Like, oh, it's a new Guitar Hero game. You can't tell anybody. And we filmed a pilot, and it was really fun actually. We did like mocap and all this kind of stuff I never done before. And then I think about a year later we filmed the game. But the girl at the start of the video, the one who's the DJ, she's a presenter now on that Holmes in the Sun, or whatever it's called. Scarlett Douglas. Yeah. And in fact, lots of people on that went off to the singer was a guy called Barnes Courtney. Have you heard of him? He's like a quite successful singer as well now. So yeah, because that was the first time I'd worked with like kind of the first kind of like acting thing I did. I guess the first one I did.
Is that your weirdest gig to date? Would you say?
I've done weirder ones. I did one the other day where I had to like kind of dress all in white, and I had to like just get up in the middle of this conference and play like a guitar solo. And
did they know you were going to do it?
I don't know. Was I supposed to be there? I don't know.
So it was a conference.
Did anybody like it? No.
So it's a conference. You're all.
It was like a big conference, like for some pharmaceutical. I don't know who it was. They'd be like, "Oh, this is for so and so." I'm like, "I've never heard of them." And then it was like 500 people, 1,000 people on this big hall. And then they were like, I got up and then do a guitar solo. Then there was a violinist in the corner. And they were like, oh, you're going to surprise them. I said, obviously, I'm sitting here in a white outfit with a guitar. They know I'm not going to just here for the salmon en croûte. They've come for the... And that was a weird one. Another weird one I did recently as well, actually. It was this is very... Oh, no, two weird ones very recently I remember. One was I got asked to go to this really swanky venue in Bath, and it was this very rich gentleman's birthday, and they were like, we just need you to at midnight appear on this balcony and play like a Deep Purple song. And they're like, which one? And they were like, Deep Purple. I said, I know that's a band, but what song do you want? So I basically on Logic made a kind of backing track, and I just like had to just solo on a balcony. That was pretty funny.
Which track did you do?
I can't remember now. I made like a kind of a
mashup.
Yeah, a mashup, a few different ones, put them together. Like it was very weird. That was very weird.
But it was well received, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was very easy for me because I basically spent the whole day in a hotel, just rock up at 12:03, back in the hotel, and then have a nice time. And then the weirdest one I got was last year I got a phone call. There's like, oh, are you available to walk a boxer to the ring? Like, and I was like, you mean like an actual, like, when it said walk a boxer, I immediately thought like walking a dog.
A dog, yeah, I'd have thought.
And I was like, I can do either of those things. So I had to like, and it was it was, they were like, oh, okay, so basically there's this boxer called Ben Whittaker. I'd never heard of him, but he was on Sky Sports. And basically he likes this Prince song, When Doves Cry. And my job was to basically walk out, play the intro riff.
Oh, that's a good one.
And then walk back to him. And then, like, it was very, very weird. But the funny thing was, I'm from a small town called Darlaston, which is near, like, Walsall. If you even know that, like, near kind of like Birmingham, I guess. And nobody's from there. I'm from there, but nobody else is from there. And so, this boxer, he's from that same town as well.
Oh, is he?
I remember being.
Is that why he asked for you?
No, he had no idea.
Right.
So, like, so two guys living in London were put together to do something in Bath, both from this small town, Darlaston. And I remember backstage, he was at Bournemouth International Centre, which is a big arena. I've played there a few times, so I kind of felt comfortable acting all cool. I've been here before. But when it was boxing, it was a different vibe because everyone was covered in blood and stuff like that. And before the thing, he was standing next to me and he's warming up really serious. And I was trying to talk to him, but I was like, he's very serious. I don't want to bother him, but he could potentially be injured. And then as soon as I told him I was from Darlaston, this town, he was like, oh, no way. And we chatted for ages. And luckily he won. Because I would feel really, if I played a song for him and he lost, I'd feel responsible. But yeah, that was.
You're going to get that gig again then, aren't you? Because you're always good.
Well, I mean, I don't. The thing is, on those kind of things, you just take it as a one-off because it's such an extra thing for them to do to bring a guitarist in, and that's actually really important. On that kind of day, you're there as the guitarist on this TV show. The people in the TV company, they couldn't care less that you play guitar. They don't care what equipment you want to use. You're kind of in their way. So you just could be in and out, you know. But it was really awkward because at the end of the thing, I walked down the runway playing guitar, trying not to cringe to death. And I walked back to him and I had to fist bump him. But he's got a boxing glove on, so I couldn't really tell where the hand was in the glove. So I just kind of like hit the corner of his glove awkwardly, and then I just went back and cried in the back for a bit. And it is on YouTube, but I will never reveal the link.
Oh, that's a shame. I was saying, can we find that? But no. Oh, there's an you're in an advert as well, aren't you?
Oh yes, I did an advert, yeah.
Yeah, the advert for mono cases.
Yeah, mono cases, like guitar bags and things like that. Yeah.
We've got the. So that's not just the guitar, that's you being you, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was kind of me. They were like, can you just like tune the guitar and, it was kind of me being me, but that was because this company, Mono, I don't know anyone heard of Mono cases, they're like really good guitar bags, but they also they're a big conglomerate, they own NME magazine, they own Harmony Guitars, loads of companies, and I've got an endorsement deal with their guitar company, and they were like, oh, do you want to do an advert for us? I was like, yeah, okay. And it was over lockdown as well, actually. So I was like, yeah, I mean, over lockdown, yeah, I'll do anything. I will actually walk a boxer even. And a dog, yeah.
I need to ask you about your desert island guitar gear. If you, what is it that you would go? You know, what do you have? What's your perfect?
Well, recently I've changed all my gear a lot. Actually, I mean, I've got like a lot of my kind of best guitars. I kind of leave them at home now, and like I've got some companies endorse me, like Harmony, Schecter, a lot of other ones. So I try and use their stuff because, so I use Schecter guitars on stage and like and a Gibson Les Paul Studio. But my favourite guitars at home, I've got a Les Paul Custom from 1988. I bought when I was a student, and I've got a Fender Custom Strat. I bought that when I was a student, and it's kind of been with me the whole time. So those are my favourite ones. But they stay at home now, really.
When you say they endorse you, what does that actually mean?
Well, it can be an endorsement. Can be many things. It could be simple as like you get a discount from them. But in the best case scenarios, and the ones I try and work with, normally the bigger the company they are, the less they can really offer you. So like if you had endorsement from Fender or Gibson, like Gibson will sometimes, when I did the Alexandra Palace gig with AJ Tracy, they borrowed me a Gibson J200, which is a very country kind of looking guitar, which for that specific song. So they borrow you the guitar, you go to their studio, you pick it up, and you can just use it for the gigs, but then you return it. But like with Schecter and some of the companies, they're really generous, and they're like they give you the guitars, and you just keep them and use them. And then if you have the most important thing is though, yes, it's free, but the most important thing is if it breaks or something happens, they can really replace it quickly for you. So you know that's the most important thing really. You need to have your tools.
Yeah. And you've mentioned that obviously you've worked with so many different musicians, and we've mentioned the role of being a friend to James and others. I mean, Do you think one aspect of being a session musician is the ability to be there as almost a counsellor, if you like, for the musicians you're working with?
Potentially, I think that depends on the artist. I mean, I've worked with some artists where they really want to get involved with the band, they really want to hang out with you, they really want to kind of create kind of family environment. But then you meet there's some that, and it's not any ways better or worse, but when I did things like Talisa or like the End-Ups people, they're really nice guys, but like kind of they'll turn up, do their thing, say hi, have a nice time, then they go. And that's fine as well, it's absolutely fine. And I don't prefer either or way, but like if you've been with somebody for a long time, I think it's natural to develop a friendship. But yeah, I guess you kind of do become like because very often they'll be like, oh, this is my new song, what do you think? And you actually have an important role. You could influence whether a song becomes. I remember one of his songs called "Say You Won't Let Go." We were like, yeah, it's all right. But then that's just had his, I think, 2.5 billion streams, and we were like, that's all right. So glad he didn't listen to us.
But do you suggest tweaks to it?
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can, but like obviously it's like someone showing you a baby picture and you go, no, your baby's ugly. You know what I mean? So you got to be like, you can't be like, is that your baby? It's quite short. But you got to.
No, but well, I mean, I get that, but you could. I mean, if you know someone well,
if you know them well,
have you thought about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. You can't. If we do like, if it's somebody you know well, and if they want your honest opinion. But you can tell sometimes people want your honest opinion. Someone just want to show you something that they're happy with already.
It's dangerous, isn't it?
You got to read the room.
What do you think about this?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. You mentioned Talisa. We've got a clip of Talisa off of End-Ups with you here. So the mechanics of something like that, then, what was that for, by the way?
Well, it looked like it was like an online radio tour thing for Heat Radio. That one was.
Okay.
Well, we did loads of like Capital, loads of other ones in a short space of time. But I think she had a single out or coming out soon. But we were just doing a tour playing covers. So just getting around it, But like I also did this morning with a few things like that. But she had a single out at the time, I think. So it was single promo, I think.
So I'm just fascinated about that first meeting. So you're about to meet Talisa, and you're going to do Stand By Me. Where does it go from there then? Do you start strumming? She starts singing. Does she? How does it work?
Well, with that one actually, I remember it was an unusual one because I'd worked with a producer, and they were like, "Oh, Talisa needs a guitarist. Can you?" What it was actually, remember, there was like, this is a new single, and it's a really like kind of pumping dance song, and they were like, "Can you do like an acoustic arrangement of this, like a chilled acoustic one?" So I just recorded. I remember it's just on my iPhone. I just kind of worked the chords out and just played a chilled version, hummed the melody. I sent that over, and they were like, "Yeah, great." And so then the next day I went rehearsed with her. I went to the studio in London, and then I like showed her the song, and it ended up being that I kind of like told her where to sing the parts, and then she wanted to do a cover. And so I quickly listened to it, and we did that as well. It was quite organic, really. It was very like traditional. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it must be gold having someone like you on hand to do that, because they could have just ended up with somebody who was pretty clueless, really. So to have somebody who's astute and experienced is quite.
Well, I appreciate that. No, I do try my best, but I mean, I think that I always have to think to myself that like if I've been paid to be here or hired to do that, then I have to. You can't like just go, I won't bother. You got to really, you got to and for, obviously, it depends how quick you are at learning things and work things out. But I also know that when I'm backing a singer like that, it's not about me being flashy or being... I'm just basically the backing track, So I'm trying to make them feel... I'm also trying to make them feel comfortable. And I do a lot of acoustic gigs with friends of mine and stuff like that. And, it's not about playing the flashiest parts. It's about just making them feel comfortable. And, and then eventually over time... sometimes you learn loads of pop songs. You might have, all these songs in your head, and sometimes they come in handy.
I always think it's interesting when I'm working at the radio station, we're doing a radio session, and it doesn't happen quite as much these days. When we were talking earlier about radio tours. So a radio tour is where when labels had a lot more money to spend on plugging their artists on radio, they would send them out around the country. So they drive around. Some quite big names, actually, would turn up at the radio station, and it would be a solo artist who couldn't play an instrument and a session musician. And it was always fascinating because it felt like they were really good friends, and we'd be in the studio, we'd be recording the tracks, and then you get to the end of that and you say, right, we're going to do the interview now. And the session musician would very quietly and gracefully exit the studio. And I always used to feel a bit sorry for him, actually.
Well, actually, it reminds you of that scene on The Simpsons meme where Homer goes back into the bush.
Yeah.
Like that. But it's funny, I see what you're saying, and sometimes, for me, some of the most, not awkward, but some of the most, not uncomfortable, that's even too harsh a word. Sometimes you'll be in a situation, you do one of those sessions, and then you can't leave, and you're just sitting there for the interview, but really, we want to leave. Not because there's anything wrong with the interview, but like, we're done now, we want to decompress, we've done our bit. And also, like, I've been in a situation before where I've been in that room as a session musician, and then the interviewer directs a question at me, and I'm like, oh, no. You don't need to know anything about, nobody wants to hear this stuff.
Well, they probably do, to be fair. Well, clearly they do. But I guess the danger is that your stories overshadow the actual musician.
Well, I mean, I've had it before when I remember working with an artist who was auditioning for some TV show, and I went with her to audition, but I was just a guitarist. But they clearly weren't very interested in her. Nothing was wrong. She was great. I don't know why, but they kept asking me questions. How about what do you want? And I was like, I'm just here to play guitar. It's not like. But that's a bad thing, really. I think you don't want to overshadow.
No.
And it wasn't anything I did really specifically. I think just on that day they liked me more than whatever. But like, yeah. But I remember doing being on a TV show with an Asian artist on like an international show, and I was sitting there just playing guitar, and then I finished. So I couldn't leave because it was on live TV. And they kept interviewing, asking me, they'd ask the artist a question, and they were like, and you, what do you think? I was like, I think we're not in a band, I'm just here to play guitar. But you can't say that, you just have to go along with it.
No, but I can see how that
But imagine if you tuned in to see like Harry Styles do an interview, and then like they're asking his guitarist questions. I mean, it's not bad, but you want to see that person, I think, on that day.
I mean, I've probably done this myself, but that's usually because it's at the start of someone's career where they don't explain that these two people are not a duo. Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I've done when I was in my first kind of sign band, we were called Dear Prudence, and we did Reading and Leeds, BBC introducing as well. So I might have come across you then. But I did some interviews, things like that, and that was the first time where I was actually getting interviewed. Where it was like, oh, I am actually supposed to be interviewed. So, yeah, it's an easy mistake to make, Sure.
I've got one more clip that we haven't used, actually. And I'd feel really bad if we didn't use the Callum Scott one. So shall we play that out? Yeah.
I pulled away because the pain's too strong, and you were saying that we don't belong. You're gonna lose me if you wait too long. Oh. Tell me what am I to do with this? I was right at your fingertips. I'm moving on, but it's you I miss. If you ever change your mind, I don't know if I'll take you back. You know that I'll be thinking about that.
So is that the single for the video? Oh,
that was
the video for the single.
That was like an acoustic, like online version.
Right. He always seems a super nice guy, Callum.
Oh, he's really nice. He's really nice. Yeah, I did a few days with Callum Scott and his band because I know the keyboard player, and they asked me to do the tour, but unfortunately I couldn't do it. And it was actually quite annoying because I was watching them. They went to like Asia and Australia and everything, but it was clashing with the James thing. Right, so I kind of had to make a decision. But sometimes that's actually an important thing to think about. Sometimes you will have two things at the same time. You have to decide what you want to do. I
guess that's as tough as not having any work in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah, it is because I mean, having two good things at the same time, you have to say no to one of them. And even if you're happy...
You mentioned the corporate thing in Glastonbury, Matt, so that's a heck of a clash, isn't it?
Yeah, that was... And I remember the people who I had to let down that day, and this is actually an important thing. If you ever have a gig and you can't do it, and you have to get someone else to do it for you, always approach them. The people who booked you, you have to be like, I can't do the gig, but I've already got this lined up and this person, and have it all ready to go. Then there'll be much less chance of...
Great advice, actually.
Yeah, and I remember that day. I'd even worked out how much it cost to change the flight names, all that stuff. And I was like, this is how much it's going to cost. I'll pay this. And I offered to pay as well because I wanted to keep the relationship nice, And they were still really annoyed, actually. Yeah. And I was like, of course I want to do this pyramid stage, Afterwards, they were fine when they realised what it was, but, Yeah.
Well, my next question was going to be what would be the best advice anyone's given to you, but I think you've just given a golden nugget there. But is there anything else that someone way back in your career said, oh, if you're going to be a session musician, this is what you need to do, and every now and again that reverberates in your head, you think, oh.
Yeah, I think that you learn a lot of things by making the mistake first, and also you learn a lot of things by seeing other people make mistakes, and then you think, okay, well, that's not what to do. And certain things that I remember, I think no matter how easy the song, because as musicians, we'll hear a song sometimes, we'll be like, oh, that's just this, it's easy, and we're very complacent, but don't be complacent, listen to it properly, and, learn the structure, and like it, and the more high profile the thing is, the more importantly, the more kind of like close you have to be to the details of the song. So like, if you're playing a drum part and there's no bass drum in the second verse, don't play the bass drum in the second verse until they ask you to do it. So always give every piece of song, every piece of music, the full attention. Even if you think it's easy, even if you think you played it before, there's a different level. And then also another thing is like, basically, most days you'll turn up into a room, you might be strangers, it might be people you know, but just be nice. Just don't be, be on time, smell nice. I smell nice, and be. And just be, thank you. Yeah, I showered last week, and then also, just don't be the guy. Don't be moaning about everything. Oh, where's the food? Da, 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 where's this stuff? Just be a positive influence, and then people will want to have you around. Hopefully, more. Yeah, that's
good. That's good.
That's the best thing.
That's really good. And final thing from me before we open the floor to questions is, you mentioned Gary Moore as being a hero. If we'd got to fill in another 4 to give you a top 5 actual guitar heroes.
Oh, guitar heroes. When I was growing up, it was definitely Gary Moore. I loved Stevie Ray Vaughan. Who else? There's a guy called Jeff Beck I liked as well. And like just kind of they're very kind of like set in stone guitar heroes. Then there's a guy called Dor Bramall who plays guitar with Clapton, and like I've been fortunate enough to meet him. He was really someone that spoke to me.
Did you actually speak to him? Yeah,
I spoke to him. Yes, I spoke to him because one of my friends, Scott McKeon, is quite a established blues player. He's mates with him, so I was able to chat with him. Who else? Feels like Hendrix. This is basically the cool people. I like cool people. That's all we get on.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there we go. Right, on that bombshell, I'm going to throw the floor open to questions now. So I guess we're going to have lots of them. I think we've got a roaming mic here, please, so we can make the questions heard around the room. I can see someone with a hand up right at the back there, so we'll start with you in just a moment. In fact, here we go, the mic is on the way.
Would you say that sort of conditioning your equipment is like important to your hiring? So, well, say I was a session drummer because I've sort of been on the community.
Yeah.
If my kit was a bit scratched up and knackered, would that result in me not being hired?
Well, I think that there's 2 ways to look at it. Normally, the higher the profile of the artist, the more it kind of like, you are expected as a musician to have like kind of like pro level gear and well maintained gear, but then you will have things like a drum tech, a guitar tech, things like that who can like kind of like sort that out for you. But what you got to remember is sometimes I've been in a rehearsal before, and there'll be a person that'll be like, I don't like that guitar because it's pink or whatever, and they're not musicians, so you often will be displaying your equipment to non-musicians, so that they won't care if it's a DW or whatever. They'll be like, oh, it's got a mark on it. But so you be prepared for people to have shallow views of your equipment. But it is important that your gear works. If you turn up on a gig and say your bass pedal breaks, it's your job to have a spare or fix it and get it going, so nobody notices. So you got to be like, your gear has to be, saying that when I did Glastonbury, I left my spare guitar with the tech, and so I had no spare guitar. So if I broke a string, I would have been like, in trouble.
Does that happen very often?
Breaking strings?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does happen a lot. Yeah, I mean, on most gigs you have a tech their job is to basically make your gear, if you break a string, they change it, they give you a new guitar, whatever. But yeah, the condition of your gear is really important. Just like if you hired someone, a plumber, to come around and he turns up with half a wrench. You need good gear. I don't mean it has to be like polished and shiny, but it is kind of like the first thing people might see of you. Yeah. If you turn up and the drummer's got a cool like black sparkle kit and it looks amazing, and like everything looks really good, you're gonna be like, oh, this guy, straight away you're on a positive step. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think that's quite important you mentioned that, actually, because I just broke a pedal over the weekend.
Okay, yeah, it happens, man. So always be prepared for that stuff. Have spares with you. And I've had lots of where I broke a string and I haven't got a spare. It's good to have that stuff because ultimately they're not going to. I remember recently I did a gig abroad and I had a Line 6 Helix and my power supply broke, and I didn't have a spare with me because they never really break. But they're not going to be like, oh, we didn't have a spare. They'd be like, that's unprofessional. They're going to think negatively. Luckily, I knew them, so it didn't matter. But in answer to your question, yes.
Cool, thank you.
It's a great question. Thank you for that. Other questions, please? There we go.
Hello. You've spoken about quite a variety of different gigs you've accepted. Where do your boundaries lie? Is there anything that you explicitly won't do or say no to or have done, and why?
Yeah, that's funny you said, actually. There is one thing where I was like, I will do that, but this way. And I remember there's this thing where I got recommended to do this thing called the Circus of Men, which is like I think it's like a male burlesque thing. I think it is anyway. And they were like, oh, can you play? We want a guitarist to play like this kind of song. And they were like, and I was like, yeah, I can do that. They were like, we do with your shirt off. I was like, oh, I don't want to. I really don't want to. And so we compromised. And I think I wore like a vest or something. But like, there's anything wrong with that. You know what I mean? But I just didn't feel comfortable at the time to do that. I mean, there probably has been gigs where I have taken my top off. But when they specifically asked me, then I was like, yeah. So, but in terms of like, if you're looked after nicely and treated with respect and, you know, and if it pays nicely, or I would normally do any gig if it's like there's things you look for. You know, is it nice people doing it? That's the most important thing. Is the money good? Is it local? If it's all three, amazing. But like, you know, but yeah, certain things I probably wouldn't do. Like, yeah, that thing, shirtless, and maybe I would.
I mean, interesting. The first thing you go to is are they nice people? Again,
yeah, you know, nice people. Yeah, because you don't want to work with not nice people. It makes the day go very long.
Any other times when you think of that you've turned a gig down because there's something you didn't quite feel was right about it?
Yeah, actually there was an artist I worked with, and I won't say who it was, but like I went to do a gig with them, and it was at some, I don't know what the event was, but I did the sound check with them, and it was a very cold feeling, and then it was just like they just walked off stage at the end of the song in the sound check, and then they were like, and then the sound engineer was like, yeah, so you're back at whatever time it was. But it was about like 1 p.m, so I had about 9 hours to like kind of just mill about, and I was like, I'm not doing this again. Not there's anything wrong with that, but just say that to me. Say, oh by the way, they want you could, you know, whatever you do. And it was too far away to go home. But yes, but if you get a bad feeling about something, it depends how what stage of your career you're at. In the first stages, you will do more things maybe to kind of like just get the work. But yeah, if you feel uncomfortable with something, then yeah, definitely don't do it. Or if you get a bad vibe.
Good one. Right. More questions, please. Come on, don't be shy. Or just to your right over there, look. Thank you.
You mentioned a bit before about like confidence and insecurities. Have you got any advice about confidence and overcoming, like comparing yourself to others and stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, like, you know, I think it's only natural for us to compare ourselves to other musicians and stuff. And that I think that's okay. But always, you know, it's important, like I said, be obviously, if you're a confident person, it will spill over into your playing and vice versa. Or sometimes people feel much more confident when they are playing. And I think that it's important to know what you're good at and what you bring to the, you know, because you might think, okay, I can't do that, but I'm good at this. Or even if, you know, you think you're good at it, because then you think you know your strengths and play to your strengths. And just be like, I think in terms of like, you know, you're going to be working with and speaking to a lot of strangers essentially, but you got to remember, everybody's in the same situation. Everyone wants to kind of do well, and like nobody wants to have bad vibes. So just, I think that's just socializing in those situations and knowing what you're good at, I think will really go a long way. And then obviously, and in terms of being confident in playing situations, when I've gone to a gig and I don't, and I really have studied the stuff a lot, I feel so confident because I'm like, I know any part of the song, no problem. But sometimes we've been ones where they've slipped a song on us before the gig, and you walk on stage and nobody's confident on that song, and it comes across. So if the more prepared you are, the more confident you feel, and use any opportunity you can just to kind of like, you know, learn what kind of player you are and what you bring to the, both in a playing aspect and also just in a social aspect.
Do you feel more confident when you've got a guitar on?
I feel more confident when we play. I mean, I'm used to having a guitar on, so yeah. But then sometimes, every now and again, you'll do a gig where you just have to like pretend to play, or you've recorded it first. And those are the ones that I find the most nerve-wracking, really, because you're like, you got the guitar on because you're not really playing, or you're pretending to play. you're really conscious of your physical appearance, and does my hand look weird, or is my leg in the wrong position? So you really focus on all those things. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, yeah, when I've got a guitar and we're playing, especially with you know songs that you know, that's definitely the most chilled. Yeah.
Another great question. Thank you, and please keep them coming. Oh yes, over here. Look, sorry, I see.
Do you know if you're like ever nervous before a gig? Is there like a way that you cope to like get yourself out of that mindset before you go on?
If you're sorry before a gig, nervous, did you say?
Nervous, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's very natural to feel nervous. And again, going back to what I said earlier, if you are nervous, you got to think, what am I nervous about? You're not generally nervous about making a mistake or making embarrassing ourselves. Really, I guess what we're most nervous about all the time. But the one thing I always think is that like, there's two things you can do. One is again, be prepared. So basically, if you know your song so well, it's effortless for you. That's going to be really helpful. Number two, I think when you're doing a gig with an artist or something, or an audience, the audience are on your side. They're immediately on your side. They want to see you do well. That you got to remember that. They're not here. They haven't come. It's got to be pretty cruel if they've come to see you fail. They've come to see you do well. So you have to do a hell of a lot to turn them the other way. So always remember that. Like you know, they want to see you do well, and the more confident you appear, and the more kind of positive you appear, it rubs off really a lot. And like I've seen artists before, sometimes they'll have a problem with their in-ears and they'll start being quite, you know, you can see it on their face, and the audience can see that a million miles away. And another important tip, actually, 99% of the time, if you make a mistake, nobody really knows other than you. So don't tell them with your face. You know what I mean? Just go through it. Just ignore it that you've done it. If you're singing and you go, they know you've made a mistake. Do you know what I mean? I make around, I think about 80% of the notes I play on any show are a mistake. Maybe not that many, but like you just don't, you know, you just when you're singing or playing and you're also performing, there's going to be some bits where it goes a bit, you know, off it, but don't let them know. You know, don't show them. So yes, so don't show them. Be prepared, and remember the audience is on your side.
A great question again, thank you. And one of the things I've noticed with vocalists that I've known for a long time is that they start fairly confident, then they've been singing the same song night after night after night after night, and then sometimes they'll go through this phase where they think, actually, maybe I don't know the words anymore. Yeah. And I've seen this with some quite big artists, actually, where they suddenly, and then once you get into that mindset, it's very difficult to get out of, isn't it?
If you second guess yourself, you're literally like, what is that? You know, what is that? Is that a G? What is a G? And you forget everything, forget how to do it. And loads of artists nowadays, it's very common to have artists use auto cues.
I've noticed that a lot recently.
Yeah.
It's not something I've spotted before.
It's not as simple. It's like another piece of equipment and another tech to run it. So it's a long thing, but like it's very common now to have that auto cue.
Great question again. Thank you. More, please keep them coming. These are fantastic. A couple at the front here. Thank you. Come to you next.
So I know you've mentioned a lot about like playing live in gigs and stuff. I just wondered if you'd done much like studio recording for commercial artists.
Yeah, I've done a lot of studio stuff. Is there anything you need to know specifically about that kind of stuff?
No, just kind of any studio stuff where you're with a commercial artist and you know.
Yeah, I've done like I've done lots of stuff with like James, and I've done stuff with like some of the end-up stuff, and like what I know is nowadays is it's more like with most artists nowadays with a big label. They'll be like, okay, we've got a session tomorrow in another country, and I'll go there. So nowadays, I've noticed more often than not, the producers or the artists are the ones that play most instruments now. I think it's a bit of a thing where they don't want to bring anybody else in to get the money for it. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I've done a lot of that stuff, and it is really fun. And those kind of days could be it could be you could walk in and they'd be like, can you do this? But yeah, and it's something really easy, but they love it. Yeah. Or it could be like, can you do this? And it's an insane thing you got to do. But like, yeah, but they're great, and like, you know, it's a different art, I think, to playing live, definitely. And I think that it's important for any of you, if you don't do any home recording and stuff, nowadays it's so important to have a grasp on that yourself. So if you don't, even GarageBand, anything, do you know what I mean? Like, you know, get your sounds ready. And nowadays, well, for guitarists especially, most of our stuff, we don't really use amps anymore, very rarely. So if you've got like a digital setup, that's your sound, and it makes it so easy to record, like a Helix or a Kemper or whatever, you know, Quad Cortex.
Amazing. So what we're just going to go to the Holly. Just a second. We need another one at the front, please. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, mate.
Obviously, a lot of your career has been based on kind of supporting other people. So, what have you done in terms of your own stuff and like writing and recording your own music?
Yeah, I did. I mean, my first thing. I think most people start off doing that as well. Do you know what I mean? And like, and don't get me wrong, that is the ultimate. If you can do that, amazing. Definitely do that. And I still write stuff now, and like I do have writing sessions with other people. I've done a lot of commercial music and things like that. And my ex-partner, we used to write a lot together. She's a singer-songwriter. But I think what happens sometimes, if it's important that know what you want to do. If you want to do your own music, then do that 100%, and it's an amazing way to go. And like, you know, if people didn't do that, I wouldn't have my job now, and that's what I've seen people do. And I was speaking to a guy the other day, a guy called Jamie Gray, independent artist. He's not signed or anything, but he has such an amazing career, just writing his own stuff, and he gets like 800,000 streams a month. You know what I mean? He's killing it. You know what I mean? He hasn't got a record deal or anything. So now more than ever, if you're doing your own music, it's the best time to do it. You don't need a label or anything, I don't think. Just do it, put it out there, do some gigs. You know, I would definitely recommend that. I mean, that's where the real kind of like, you know, that's the end game for most people. And I know loads of musicians who started off that way and then go into my job or started in my job. Or like, there's a band called, is it Temperance Movement? They were session musicians first, like in London, and they start, you know, a band. So yeah, I mean, I think the two aren't mutually exclusive. But like, you know, if you want to do your own stuff, and I still enjoy doing it. I mean, I'm not pursuing being an artist or anything, but like I love writing stuff, and I still do all the time. If you want to do that, make that your focus and go for it. You know, I think you know, obviously you need to support yourself financially, so do whatever you need to do, but definitely do it. And it doesn't have to be. And you know, you can write. You might write 5 songs, and one of them is amazing for you. 4 of them, they're all right, not for me. But they can be for adverts, could be anything. You know, you can make so much good money doing that kind of stuff. You know, so if you do your own music, do you? So yeah, just. The thing you can do is, I think, just like you record it yourself as well. You're doing everything already, mate. That's it. Perfect.
It's interesting, I think, that more now in 2023 than any other time, so many musicians, they need a double life, don't they? They've got their original stuff, then they're doing weddings, functions at the weekend as well, and with 2 different websites, 2 different names and all of that. And that's, I mean, that's always happened to a certain extent. It seems really common at the moment, I think.
Yeah, that's very common. Yeah, I think there's different levels to that kind of corporate function scene. And I think when I was in London is when I first realised those kind of jobs can be incredibly lucrative. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, and some of them, I remember I went to Maldives for 2 weeks to do a Christmas gig, and it was a corporate thing. And like, you know, that wouldn't have happened for an artist gig. It was because, like, you know, so.
And people are often a bit embarrassed about that side of it, you know.
No,
you know, I've been at a wedding where I've seen, you know, some pretty cool bands that I've been playing through BBC Introducing, an indie band, and there they are, you know, playing Hi Ho Silver Lining or whatever, and they're mortified that I've seen them, but there's nothing wrong with it, is there?
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. I mean, like, you know, ultimately, you know, when the people who are embarrassed about it probably don't really understand it, and I think it's a case of like, again, like, if some of my friends are doing one of those gigs and it's in a nice place, you looked after nicely and it's paid well, I'll absolutely do that. Do you know what I mean? It's and that can be really fun, and that's sometimes how we kind of like catch up with each other.
Yeah.
So it'd be like, you know, you're all working, but then on this date in like this quiet month, you can all get together and just hang out for the day.
And they're doing that to get the funding to do what they really want to do, aren't
they? Yeah. I mean, so many people who do their own music, especially, you know, when some, I mean, you know, I guess it's uncouth to mention the figures, but you can earn very good money doing some of those corporate things, like very good.
Well, the clock is ticking. We're into the last couple of minutes now. So if you're feeling a bit shy and you've been wanting to ask a question and haven't got round to it yet, or one's just entered your head, now's the time to do it, because we're going to expire fairly soon. So any more questions, please? Here we go. Just put your hand up again, please, so Holly can see it. There we go.
This is a bit of a weird one, but Beyonce's dad said that Beyonce's had more failures than successes. Would you say that you've had the same?
That's a good question.
And the biggest success and biggest failure?
I think, I guess, I mean, you know, it's funny. I guess where it comes is what you class as a failure and a success, really. I mean, I've definitely had lots of failures. But yeah, I think, you know, those are kind of what build your character. And I said earlier on, I think, you know, in terms of like advice people, you learn what not to do from your mistakes. And it kind of like, you know, over time, there's less and less ways you can mess things up. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's definitely true. What did you say at the end? Sorry, I missed the last bit of the question.
Yeah, what's your biggest failure and success?
My biggest failure, I don't know really. There's
Not
too-
plucking up the courage to talk to Gary Moore, I'd
many.
suggest.
Oh yeah, yeah. Loads of times I've wished I'd taken pictures of people. I did at the end of our tour in Dublin. Conor McGregor came to our show and he invited us to his pub. So we had a lock-in at his pub, and I was like, "Should I get a picture?" Oh, best not. And then like the bass player was just there with a picture with him. So I was like, "Oh, I should have done that as well." Anyway, that's a little tangent. But like, biggest failure. I mean, I remember in the early days doing a band called Wonderland. It was like it was something to do with Westlife. It was like this girl band who was one of their sisters or something.
Oh, I
remember?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
And I remember I did one gig with them, and then 6 months later, I did it again. But I was so complacent about the music because I thought, I've done it before. I remember going in the rehearsal, and I think, I'm so at my depth. I've not learned this properly.
Right.
And I never did that again. Because the whole
they'd evolved, hadn't they, in that time, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're around now, but yeah, you know. But a big success, I'm not sure really. I think we did, I guess it was like the headline arena tours that we've done. We did like an 8-piece, with James it was, we did like a fully live band, so no track. So 2 guitars, BVs, 2 keys, and we did like Wembley, and I got to play Genting Arena in Birmingham, and my family came to see that. I think that's what I enjoyed the most, because you know, my family got to see me do something like in a big arena, so that was cool. So yeah, and then lots of failures all the time, most days.
But I imagine when you get to the end of that arena gig, there's no feeling quite like it, is there really?
Yeah, I mean, that was really, and it was only till afterwards we realised, like, oh, that was actually really cool. We played at Wembley with no track, fully live, no click, you know, like how it used to be.
Yeah,
you know.
that's what I mean about being...
Not there's anything wrong with using track, because it's a necessary thing today. You can't have 20 people on stage to recreate a whole song.
This is what I mean about making sure you find 10 seconds to think, this is amazing.
That's actually reminded me, something very important for all musicians, get used to using in-ear monitors. You know, don't leave it till the first time you need to use them. Just use them all the time. You know, don't have to be expensive ones. Just some Shure SE5, whatever. You know, 200 quid ones, or those ones you get on Amazon that people go crazy about. I can't remember the call now. But yeah, get used to that. That's really important. And playing with a click, so important.
Thank you so much for being here today. It's really good to see you, and it's the start of Industry Week. There are many more amazing talks to come. The other guests have got a lot to live up to, though, after today, haven't they? Please give it up for Ahir.
Thank you.
Welcome, mate.
Thank you. Yeah, very good. Yeah.